Good evening. Welcome to New Tracks. My name is Jim Kello, and I'm your host for this evening. New Tracks is where mentors help modelers build. Our goal is to encourage model building and help modelers like you develop the modeling skills, techniques, and most importantly, the confidence every one of us needs to build the models we really want. We want you to experience the thrill of saying, I built that. On each New Track show, the best model railroaders demonstrate innovative new products, modeling techniques, new technology, and answer your modeling questions. New Tracks is a great opportunity to have talented modelers become your mentors. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you've been with us before, welcome back. We hope all of you come back often and tell your friends to join us. We currently have over 1,000 subscribers on either our website or our YouTube channel. We hope that you'll become a subscriber. And on YouTube, all you have to do is go to our channel, New Tracks Modeling, and click on the subscribe button, ring the bell, and check all. You'll receive all the notices for the future shows and the login links. We currently have over 300 YouTube videos that you're also able to see a lot of the past shows. On Zoom, you can watch, ask questions, speak to other modelers, show your modeling live, and participate in the lively after show. To join on Zoom, all you have to do is go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, check subscribe. You'll get an email from the website. You'll confirm the email, then you're officially subscribed and you'll get all of the future notices. Please feel free to share the login links that you receive either on Zoom or YouTube with your friends and encourage them to join us and participate in our shows. Finally, if you want to be a guest presenter and show your models and techniques, we have several ways that you can do that. Send me an email to Jim Kello at newtracksmodeling.com and let's discuss. I really prefer the telephone for something like this. And if you'll send me your telephone number in that email, I'll give you a call back. Or if you'd like to donate a little bit of your time and volunteer to help us with our events or our YouTube video productions or the website, or just to give us ideas for future shows, please send me an email about this to the same address. Well, thanks so much for being here tonight. Now let's get on with tonight's show. Well, welcome everybody. Tonight I'd like to talk about the upcoming build-alongs a little bit. We have 3 build-alongs tonight that I think you're going to enjoy. And on our website, we have all of the future build-alongs listed with when they start, how long they're going to be running, and who's doing them, and what the model is, and the discounts that the manufacturers are giving you to purchase the model so that you can build along with the modeler on the show. So I hope you'll go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, and go to the build along section, and you'll get all of the information on the future build alongs. There's one build along on there, Banta Models, that was supposed to start with Clark Kooning MMR on December the 1st, and we've had to postpone that for 1 week to start on December the 8th. Clark's not going to be in town for December the 1st, and so we're going to be moving that by 1 week. But it'll still run then for 4 weeks and start just 1 week later than it was originally programmed to be started. Now I'd like to go to Chris Coarse and have him tell you a little bit about the upcoming My Build next week. Chris?
All right, thanks, Jim. Get the slide up here. All right, My Build featuring you. To participate, drop me an email, railrunner130@hotmail.com. with your photos, and I'll include them in the slideshow. Right now, I've got, I believe it's 4 entries. I sat down last night and put them all together into a slideshow. So looks like we've got a healthy participation already. So, but we always encourage more. Bring what you've got, whether it's something you're proud of, something you need help with, a lesson you learned somewhere along the lines, or something you found that you thought was really cool, and you're looking for information about it. Anything along those lines, we'll help you out. And we promise not to throw darts at you. So anyway, my build, if you have stuff to show us, railrunner130@hotmail.com, and that should be it for now.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I'd like to encourage too, all of the people that have done the past build-alongs. I know some of you may not have had your models built when they were finished, but if you're coming along with them and they're almost finished or have finished them, we'd love to see them. And so if you can participate in the My Build, that'd be a way to show us what you came up with. Thanks again, Chris. Now let's turn to Paul Thomson for his quick tip of the evening. Paul, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Jim. And tonight is going to be a bit of a quick pick. Let me just get my screen share going here. I thought I would talk about modules within modules. And if you get my drift, this is something I came up with. I had to modify a couple of modules, and I needed something to work underneath quickly, effectively, and without a lot of cutting and all the rest of it. So what I did was I made up these little electrical modules, I call them, that I could just put underneath. And what you see here is a couple of terminals and some pass-throughs for DCC. And now on to the next slide. Taking this a little further, this is something that I did in metal that you can also tack on, and then this would be screwed up under a module or under a layout. And of course, the first one, the idea here was to use glue to put them up. There's no real, what you would call mechanical force working down on a lot of this stuff. And the weld bond, believe me, once you put that stuff on there, it's not coming off if it's wood to wood. And basically, guys, that's just an idea that you may be able to pick up on for tonight. Thank you.
Well, Paul, thank you so very much. I'm really happy with the way that Paul's quick tips have been received. We're getting 45, 50 people that are viewing these by video even after the show. So that tells me that you really enjoy what Paul has been doing. This was his original idea to start these. And it's really turning out, I think, to be very successful. So, Paul, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, now we've got 4 really great modelers, 5 great modelers to introduce you to. We're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the show, again, as we did last week, because we've got a full show. And we certainly want to give Charlie Getz as much time as he needs to talk about the NMRA and its museum out in California. This is something that I'm personally really interested in because, unlike, I guess, most of you, I don't know anything about it, and I've wondered how it came out and what it was all about. So to start off, we've got the Motrak models build along, and today of the 4 modelers who are building this kit of Motraks, Greg Cassidy and Bob Farquhar are going to talk about their model of the kit in HO for Greg and S scale for Bob. So Bob, I'll turn it over to you first, sir.
All right, I'm going to go do this. Come on here, there it is. Okay, this is going to be part 3 of the 5. There's going to be walls, windows, and doors installed today. S scale for me. And this from last time, using the 100 line driftwood stain. I want to stain my before I paint because I want the building to look used. I didn't want a brand new pristine look on it at all. So a lot of people do the bracing on these pieces before they start staining and painting. I don't, but anyway, I have my own reasons. But so then I use this ivory colored acrylic paint on there. I always use a grout sponge. It has smaller holes in it, better control, and just dab it onto the piece of wood and so on, and put them in pieces of wax paper and let it dry overnight. And then I can then I do my brass bristle brush and I scrub it. So this area
Hey,
right here.
Bob, can
Yeah.
you click on the slideshow mode down at the bottom?
Sorry about that. Sorry. Yep. There you go.
Thanks.
Forgot to do that today. There you go. So this area here is not scrubbed, and you can see the difference of the dirtier looking paint on the rest of the other pieces here. And then I did my, just like Clark was talking about last week, the trim on the edges. Did that, just put them on there like this, and then after it dries, it cut it to size. And the nice, what I've done here is use a thinner strip wood than it said in the instructions, and because I didn't want them be, really wide, so I got the thinner one here. The other thing too, this is the same color paint on the trim, but the wood is denser on the strip wood than it is on the wall pieces, so it gives a nice little differentiating, well, never mind, different. Anyway, so then I did some bracing on it real quick. Use this burnt sienna acrylic paint on the windows and doors. These are laser cut. The N scale, S and O scale kits all come with laser cut windows and doors in this kit, and the HO has plastic windows and doors. And there's the windows and doors installed. And yeah, then I just like what Clark did last week as well. He was talking about doing the shape of an L, make sure it's square on both sides, and then put it together. And you see here, the groove is still wet. And then when I noticed, when I took the picture, and then I thought, oh geez, that's not level. I straightened it up later on to make sure that's on there, but you have to add that piece in there. And that's it for me. And over to you, Greg, to continue on.
All righty, thank you, Bob. So I've got mine pulled up here. And so I'll be covering the HO scale portion of part 3 of the Motrak build along of the Adamsville Depot. One of the things that I noticed in all these 4 different scales that we're working in is the way that the buildings were assembled. In the smaller scales, the S scale, HO, and N scale, they have the more typical corner trim where you butt the walls against it and you brace it on the inside and then put a piece of corner trim on the outside like Bob was just showing. But on the O scale, you have the tab and slot type of construction. I've seen both of these done in all different scales in different kits. And I don't know if one's better than the other, but I've seen the tab and slot in larger kits more often. And I think it's a little stronger. That's probably why you see that. So for mine, I had already shown painting the walls in the last session. Often I will go ahead and put my windows and doors in the walls while they're still flat, and any other work I may need to do on them because it's easier then. But in this case, I was going to be masking the building once it was assembled, and the walls and doors could get in the way of doing that. So I decided to assemble the building first and then install the windows later. Now, for this, I used my standard practice of assembling walls when you're going to have corner trim and their wood siding. Basically, it's putting a brace on the inside that's set back just enough that you can fit another brace that's here on the end wall right in there. If you leave that space the same, then when you put the end wall in, it leaves a nice little notch for the corner trim. And here I'll show you what I mean. The bracing 1 is on the sidewall and it's glued to the sidewall. Bracing 2 is on the end wall and it's glued to the end wall. And if you put them together, you then have this nice little notch right here for the corner trim that fits in. And that's a standard way of that I do of putting my walls together. It's a very strong joint, makes for a nice 90-degree angle. And then once I've glued the walls together, I'll go ahead and clamp it. I often will put 2 sets of walls together in an L shape and let them both dry, make sure they're square, and then put them together. But this one was so small, it was easy enough to put all of them together at one time and make sure it all came out straight. Then once that had dried, just as Bob had, I put in my corner trim. And like he did, I didn't need to cut the corner trim to size. I just made sure that as I glued it in, I made the bottom flush and then the top was overhanging some. And I use canopy glue to hold that in. It's nice because if it squeezes out, it's easy to get rid of and it usually is invisible. And then once the corner trim was dry, I would use a scalpel and cut the little part that was sticking up off. Then I'll use a sanding stick to sand everything flush. And as I showed in the previous session, I had sanded the edges of the side walls at an angle as well. So that way, once you're all done, you get a nice crisp angle that leaves a flush surface for the roof to attach to. The next thing was to glue in the trim around the freight door. I put in the top piece first, measured it to fit, and then glued it in. And then you can measure your 2 side pieces from that down to the bottom of the wall and glue those in. Often you'll have a contrasting color in your corner trim and trim around a door or something. But since I was going to be doing 2 colors on my walls, I decided to leave it as is. Now, mine was not going to be a freight door because I'm building this into a coffee shop that is part of the depot. So I needed to cut a window in my freight door that was going to be the serving window. And one of the tricks I do is I usually have a scale size person laying around on my workbench so I can use them to see where I need to position stuff. And that showed me that my window was in the right place. Now, once I was ready to install the windows that came with the kit, I painted them. The HO scale version came with tissue plastic windows, and that's very common with HO kits because tissue makes millions of these things. I airbrushed my windows and door with my burnt umber. And then after that had dried, I came back and brush painted the trim on the windows in my lighter tan. Next up was to cut the acetate for the windows. And this was a nice little addition in the kit, is the cutting template that shows you what size to cut all the windows to. If you don't get the acetate that comes with tissue windows, then you find yourself using a ruler to measure all these things. And sometimes that's difficult. Now, the way I tend to glue the acetate into plastic windows is with a thin cement like this. I'll place the acetate on the window and then just touch it to the corners. And the capillary action allows it to wick in underneath it. And then once it dries in place, I'll just trim them off and touch up the little spots where I trimmed it with a brush. At this point, I went ahead and masked off the bottom part of my building and airbrushed it with the burnt umber. Then when I was test fitting in my windows and doors, I decided that with the door, I wanted to paint the trim around it in my light tan color. Now, the cupola on this comes with laser cut windows for it, but this having a kitchen inside it, I decided I wanted to make them into vents. So I actually found some pallets and skids that looked right. I cut little pieces off of them and then painted them in my light tan color. At this point, I went ahead and glued in my windows and my door. And for this, I used canopy glue, but I've used ACC in the past as well. When you're gluing plastic to wood, both of those seem to hold equally as well. Then I went ahead and the trim on my cupola vents was a dark brown. I went ahead and glued those in place. And then I made a little service counter for my window and stained it with a nice brown stain. And that's about as far as we've come with this. Next week, I think it's going to be Clark and Bob will be covering, adding the roof and the cupola, and we'll take it from there. So thank you.
Greg, Bob, thank you so very much. And like I say, you'll hold your questions until a little bit later. Then they'll still be around and to answer all the questions you may have. Thank you so much, Greg. You and Bob did a great job. Now we'd like to turn to David Schultz for his build along of the All Nation Waffle Side Boxcar. David, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Well, welcome back, everybody, to northern Minnesota, where many were cold, but few are frozen. Anyway, we're going to tackle this boxcar. Hopefully everybody is where we left off last week. If not, you can go back, watch the other videos. So anyway, there's what the finished product is going to look like. I was going to give you a little bit of history about the car, but most I could find out was they started building these in like the late 60s. And the best I could learn was it apparently started with Press Steel Car Company started making these. And the idea was that you could put the load right up against the side of the boxcar and still be able to reach into those pockets and get the load locks. Where before they had to put the load a little bit away from the wall to get to the load locks. This way they could dig in there and grab them, and it became very popular. Pullman, of course, got involved along with everybody else who was building, and they were quite a popular car for almost anything. But anyway, that's most of that. So anyway, everybody should be about here. Got the parts all cleaned up, ready to go. You got those center sections. That's where the door will cover those up eventually. You've got the floor and the ends cleaned up, and we're ready to start assembling this thing. So first thing you need to do, and I didn't do it, I glued this end on before I did this, but you should drill for whatever truck screw you're going to use. I used 440. That it's right into that little pocket into these. You have to do a little cleanup to get the nut to fit down in there. If you're going to put in the floor, if you bought the more expensive kit, you get the nailable steel floor. So you might have to gouge that out a little bit with a Dremel to get the nut to sit down in there far enough so it doesn't interfere with the floor. But anyway, then put in whatever nut you're going to use. And I would recommend that you cover it with something, a piece of plastic or whatever. That way, if you seal the car up tight, the nut will never fall out of there. Otherwise, it could break and fall out, and then you're going to end up ripping the roof off to get that nut back in its place. Here we are, we got a square, put the floor on there, you got the notch cleaned up, and a little super glue, clamp it up, and you'll get your ends to be square. Try to keep these as absolutely square as you can. I realize the wall, the end, it might bow a little bit one way or the other, but once we glue the sides on, we'll be able to take that out of it. But try to keep this stuff as square as possible. You can use the wood blocks, or you can use the steel square that I have, along with these clamps. All right, this piece here, where the little flanger up sign is pointing, that's where we're going to put the glue on this piece when we glue the sides on. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is after you get the sides on, is just assemble these parts, the two sides and this piece together, and then try to fit it on the car. If you find that your side is a little too wide, then what you can do is where I'm pointing there, you can start sanding away on these two edges. This edge here on the left side of the car and on the right side of the car, and you just take little bits off of each side and keep fitting it until the piece actually drops in. If you find that your side is a little too short, you can add to the ends. 10 thousandths, 15 thousandths, whatever you need to add, you can add to that end. And it'll, once you paint the car, it'll work out beautifully. So anyway, this is how I did it. This stuff is tough. Like I said before, you really got to work at it to get it to. So I used some fairly aggressive sandpaper. I probably got like 100 grit in there to chew away with this. But you take a little bit off each side, and then just, this is the other side. Of course, you have to flip it over and then piece it together. And you can see where the bottom one, the gap is a little narrower than it was on the top one. And you just keep fitting them. And as soon as they fit, then that where I was pointing on the on these middle pieces, that's where you'll put your super glue. And then you piece it together, and I used a couple of clothespins to hold it. And they fit amazingly well. You should be able to line up all the edges and keep all of this square. It's pretty easy thing to do. Anyway, those of you that have the nailable steel floor, feel free to put that in on the flooring. You can, what I did was I started the one piece towards the middle and worked to the edge, and then the other one I can cut to fit. You may have to cut both pieces if you want to really keep it concentric, but I figure if you get past the door there, nobody's going to see it anyway. The one thing I didn't talk about is on this kit, you could probably make opening doors. I don't bother to do it. I'm not a big fan of opening doors, and it would probably have to be another show, and I'm not gonna, I won't tackle it because I didn't do it on either of these kits. But you might be able to leave out that centerpiece and come up with a way to design an opening where the doors will actually slide in the rails. But like I said, that's probably for another show. Anyway, after these pieces are glued together, this center section on this piece tends to be a little bit thick. And once again, my little pointer is pointing at where it's a little thicker. So what I ended up doing was taking a Dremel with a drum sander on there and grinding that down so that was more even. That way you don't get a bow in the middle of the car. So, all right, then what we're gonna do before we put the sides on, we're gonna make sure the roof pieces will fit. There's little grooves on each end of the car that the roof goes into. You'll notice there's little knobs on each end and they fit down in there. It may require a little bit of cleanup in there. I'm not sure if the one end here was a little bit off. So I took my rounded blade X-Acto and just kept scraping in there until the roof piece fit down in there. And there you can see where the roof matched up beautifully with the ends. That's what you want. You want that nice level piece. It's going to get covered up with the roofing material here eventually, but you want to make sure that those are even with the ends. And also you may have to shape that little piece a little bit. One of mine wasn't round, it was square. So I had to take a little sanding block and work on that a little bit to round that so it would actually pop down into that configuration. Anyway, there's the roof put together, one of the sides put together. Now, one of the other tricks I did here, I got my pictures out of order. You see this little white strip in the roof. I discovered when you put the roof together, and this is kind of the way it's designed, you'll have to go through and figure out, do you need a 10,000ths piece in there, 20? I think it'd be rare if the roof actually went together and didn't need anything. John includes a biscuit that goes on the underside. The little raised piece on there is 40,000ths. Well, I only needed 20 to complete this roof. So I used just regular white styrene and filled in that gap and glued the roof together. Once again, keep it as square as possible, find a straight edge, even an old board or whatever to glue the pieces together. And then in some of the later pictures here, I'll show you where you trim it up. So once again, there are the sides. You see the roof sitting on top there, getting ready to go. There's a picture. Here I'm showing if you put your sides together on the ends there, it was still just a little bit tight. So I ended up taking a sanding block and just grinding that side down a little bit to get it to actually pop in there like this. Get a good tight fit on that. All right. After you get your side glued on it, if the guys who once again ordered the high-end kit, you can add in the load locks. It's a separate piece that glues in there. Once again, I bought the lesser kit. I did buy one with this in there to demonstrate how those go in, but they fit right up against that door divider block and fit almost perfectly in there. So yeah, there was the 20,000ths piece I had to put on the roof. So I got my pictures a little out of sequence here, but so I put in 20,000ths. I was able to glue that in there, and there it is. I got it up against the block there to keep the roof straight, and then started trimming it down. You have to trim along the edges there to make sure the piece. And then here's that piece, that biscuit I was telling you about. That's a 40,000ths wide piece. It was a little wide for mine, so I just flipped it upside down and still used it to help hold the roof together. It strengthens the roof to put that piece in there. And then you got to trim around these edges to make sure the roof, there's a little notch in the roof where the car sides will actually fit into. So you have to make sure you clear that out of there, whatever styrene you use, if you have to use any at all. Then you decide the roof pieces. Now, the black pieces on top there, that's Pullman's design. They had those pressed panels like that. Probably the others pressed steel. You'll have to figure out which car you want to do, but these smooth ends are probably the other manufacturers. Like I say, I didn't do a lot of research on this, but I do know that Pullman was the one that came up with those pressed panels. But the rest of them are all these X panels. They sometimes will come in varying colors. It really doesn't matter. But what you'll want to notice on these is one edge has a rivet strip. The other side does not. So as you start gluing these down, make sure you keep your rivet strips oriented in the right direction so that you got a rivet strip on every panel. Once again, you'll have to take a sanding block and clean those edges up just a little bit. They might have some dimples or little rises here and there. Pretty simple to clean those up. And then you start in the middle of your roof. Put the first panel in right in the middle, and then you start working out towards the edges, adding more of the panels as you go along. And then when you get to the end, you decide whether you want to use that smooth panel or the Pullman style panel, depending upon the car you're building. And there it is with the Pullman on the other end. So you can super glue all those in place, use a straight edge so that the panels don't go back and forth. The last panel you put on there may overhang just a little bit, but that's not an issue. We'll sand that off to be even with the end. So it'll and then the neat part about this kit is the roof can remain removable. It snaps down in there pretty tight. I'm kind of surprised by that, but that works really well. Then we're going to move into the good old center sills. Now John's included, mine came with 3 different sets. You had some center sills that came out, or the draft gear that came straight out of the car with no drop on it whatsoever. And then the ones on the left there have got a kind of the most severe drop that he has available. And then he also included a couple of just extra coupler pockets that can be glued onto these pieces in the middle if you need a lesser drop. And then he's got some that, here's the ones with that's the most extreme offset that he has. And then these are the ones with no offset at all. So once you mount the trucks of your choice on the car, you'll have to decide which of these center sills you're going to need to put in your car. Now I use the Atlas trucks, and they required the offset draft gear. And here's a demonstration showing how the other pieces will slide right into there. So if you need that style, you just slide those in, glue them in. They're not going to be movable. The moving part is the gray piece. That whole draft gear will move, but this coupler pocket slides in there and glues in place. And there it is put in place, just demonstrating how that will look when it's in place. There is a slot right about where the truck screw goes, and that's what the sill will land against, or I keep calling it a sill. That's where the draft gear will land against that screwed when it goes in and out. So it will actually bottom out in both directions. These are the Atlas trucks that I use. They're the 70-ton truck, and it rides much too high. So what I had to do, and I discovered this, now you guys that maybe use Atlas more than I do, I'm a Pro to 48 guy, so I don't use a lot of Atlas trucks for my modeling. But I discovered that you can remove the screws from this piece, and that comes out. And then this is the pin on the truck that needs to be reduced. Well, I discovered you can flip that piece upside down and put it right back in the truck. And then it shows you how much to remove. So I took a Dremel and I put the screws back in, and I took the Dremel and ground that down. So it's even with that bolster. And now I can, with that offset draft gear, my couplers are just about perfect height with these. Yeah, as you can see in the picture here, I'll have to maybe drop the coupler a little more with a spacer in there, but otherwise it should be good to go. And so anyway, everybody start gluing your stuff together. Get the sides put in place. You don't glue the roof on, leave the roof open for now. Later on, if you want to glue it in place, you may, but we'll leave that off for now. But get the sides glued on. You want to make sure they're lined up with your ends. And we'll next week, we're going to tackle the old underframe. We're going to put all the piping in, put the brake cylinders, air reservoirs, all of that in place. So that'll be more of a full show than this one. But next week when we get together, you should have the sides on your car, the ends, and the trucks of your choice, and the draft gear slid into place and ready to go. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, David, I can't thank you enough. That's a beautiful job, and it looks like your car is really coming along nicely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've got a question.
Yeah, but I appreciate it if you could hold it for just a while, and we'll get all the questions at one time after we get along with the show a little bit. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to ITLA, Bryan Schilling, for him to build along for the ITLA model. Bryan, welcome.
Hi, how are you? So as I had stated before the show, unfortunately, Nick couldn't join us tonight, so we'll just continue along. A couple things that I was intending on showing quickly here is just a little bit in regards to the dry brush painting and a couple steps that I've taken in order to deal with some of the paintings. So I'm just going to switch views here so that everybody can kind of see. Okay, so I'm just showing my my board here, so to speak. So last week I had shown a couple of the quick base paints and so forth, but I've taken a few of these a little further along. So just to kind of show what's going on with those, I've done some of the dry brushing of the stone at the bottom. Unfortunately, the color is a little washed looking here. Let me see if I can, but basically what I've started to do is build up the layers of what's going on top of the paints. With the stucco, I've just used a very kind of parchment kind of color type thing, because basically what I want to do is I want that to, well, that's a bit better, not be perfect in the coverage. I'm not sure if you're picking it up, but there's a little bit of variation in the color because I want the stucco to look a little worn and whatever. So I'm not going to paint it perfect and then have to do a lot of work. I'm just trying to work with what I've got a little bit. So as for the dry brushing technique that we were talking about before, I'd shown this panel, and I've even taken it just one quick step further, is that camera always works beautifully before I get on the show, and then it seems a little fuzzy. So let's see if that helps, unfortunately. What I've done is on the side over here, basically I've done the backwash. And as I said before, I'm using kind of the hunter line type of stains because I kind of like how they get into the cracks and for this particular approach. Then what I've done is I've basically taken, again, I won't say dollar store paint, but the cheaper kind of acrylic paints, and I've started to dry brush the base kind of yellow color on. In this particular case, it's kind of like a daybreak or something, but it's not a kind of a bright orange. It's very pale orange, sorry, pale yellow. And then from there, what I do is I try to, oh, that's better. I try to take and do individual kind of bricks where I take, like the ochre, I take almost like a tan brown and like a linen color type thing. And I basically just hit random bricks and so forth in order to kind of give those little bit of pops of the color. After that, what I did with this particular version was I actually took and went and did with the sepia brown from Hunter Line. And what I actually kind of really appreciate the kind of the tone down of the color that it gave all by itself. So with this one, I'm not going to do too much more with this, other than, there will be some weathering kind of stuff that I'll want to do towards the end. Now, what I wanted to kind of point out here as well is these little inserts that I haven't popped out. I kind of played with the the stones. So before last time when we were speaking, I kind of hit it with that kind of a warmer gray for the base. But what I've gone over with that is I've gone over that with the Hunterline kind of creosote black. So that kind of sits into some of those cracks. And then with these kind of areas, I've started playing with kind of dry brushing on some of the colors, and you can see how you can kind of develop kind of that pop of the stone and the variation. A lot of the stones that I kind of see in our area usually have warmer and cooler grays, some browns and so forth. So that's more indicative of the area that I'm in type thing. So that is something as we had discussed last week in the questions is if you're really struggling with those kind of things, my real suggestion is you take snapshots of building faces of the brick, stone, whatever the materials are, so that you have something that you can kind of use as a reference to look at while you're trying to develop your paint on these. Okay. So first thing I was going to just do a quick demonstration of, since I've got this here, is I was just going to take and show quickly how I go about doing this dry brush, because that seemed to be a big question that was kind of coming up in the comments. Now, last week, someone had put up a military modeling kind of set of colors, or sorry, paint brushes for doing dry brushing. So being that I was in need of some paint brushes anyway, I went out and started looking at some of the different ones that were out there, and I was able to get 3 or 4 kind of decent brushes that kind of seem to be a bit more suitable for what this is. So I'm just going to try to show here. So these 2 top brushes here, they're more of a rounded top. This one here, it's firm, but the end of the bristles are soft. This one here is just more of a straight line, and it's flat. But what it has here is it's still got some nice firmness to it, and that's where I think the difference is. You don't want a big long brush type thing, meaning bristle, and it's really soft, because I find that it's really hard to kind of start to control that dry brushing technique with those. So the idea that that you want to kind of work with here is that you want to get the paint onto the brush. And I typically do this, is I shake it up and then I just dab out of here, because I'm only usually doing little bits at a time. So I'm not worried about the paint jar kind of thing drying out, but I'll dab onto that brush. So I've got a pretty good amount of paint at first. And then basically all I do is I just drag it across until I kind of work it in for the first little bit. Then I'll kind of go back and I'll just do that once or twice type thing until I kind of get an amount of paint on there that I feel comfortable with. One of the things that I would suggest doing in your first doing this is just kind of get yourself kind of familiar with what the pressure is that you want to feel here, because you don't want this to all of a sudden just show like a huge amount of paint, because it'll just fill up all those nice crevices and everything that, you know, with a kit that they've actually cut in there. And if you fill them all up, basically the kit's going to look like garbage to me. So if you kind of work with this a little bit, just kind of get yourself comfortable with what that is until you kind of get a familiar with rhythm, and then it will go a lot easier for you when you actually get to the actual material you're going on. So I'm not a person who typically rushes what I'm doing with these, because this is part of the thing that kind of relaxes me and so forth. But what I want to do is I want to get on there and work a surface until I'm fairly even all the way across. Now, if I have to mask off areas, which I've done at the top here, I'll do that. But basically when it comes to stuff like bricks and stones and whatever, I'm dragging on a diagonal to the actual um, area so that it's not going into the crevices. If you go straight across or up and down, chances are you are going to fill up those little crevices a lot quicker. And that's what you're trying to avoid here. So it's just a matter of developing and practicing a technique until you're kind of comfortable with what those are. And you're looking so that you're not pressing so hard and applying so much paint, because to me, the idea is you don't want to have this all perfectly painted. You want to be able to have some variation in it, because that's what gives that kind of precursor to the weathering and the staining and everything that happens with those. So the idea is I'll just take my time and develop those slowly, and I'll go one way and then I'll go crossways, and that way it kind of evens out what the paint will look like once you get there. So you can already see that it's starting to build up on this. Okay, but I'm not really much different from what's on the other side, and I still get all that variation of all the crevices. So that's really the pattern that'll go through. And if I have to, I'll do this once, and if I feel that it's still a little light, then I'll go back and do another go around in order till I get to a point where I've built up enough on there so that it's at a comfortable level for me. So it's really just playing with this and just being patient with yourself, so that when you're doing this, it's going to have that nice effect at the end. So the good thing about what is on these ITLA kits is Nick has built in a lot of texture in these kits naturally. So for those of you who have received this kit and have pulled it out, you'll see that there's a lot of areas where the bricks look like they've already spalled. There's cracks in areas and stuff like that. So what you're going to see is when you do this dry brushing kind of technique across here, you're going to pick up on a lot of that stuff very quickly. So that's why you kind of want to just take your time and pull across until you're happy with a level of what's happening there. So you can see that the brick and everything and all those ones are really starting to pop out. Okay. So typically what I'll do is I'll do this whole surface. I'll let that dry. If it's good enough, great. I'll hit the pops of the other colors. And I use a very fine brush, and I actually hit individual bricks. So for those who have challenges with eyesight like I do, I get out the kind of the googly eyes, so to speak, and that way with the brush, I'll just a little bit of paint, hit a brick, and just randomly go around it. If you've got a picture, it really kind of helps you kind of develop those, what patterns you kind of see, or how much to put on or how little to put on. Up real close, it looks a little funny, but by the time you put that on your layout or whatever, it's going to look pretty good type thing, because you're not going to be able to see any little miscues that you might have had, as long as you haven't gone too heavy anywhere. Okay, so once that's done, like I said before, what I've done is I've gone back with the sepia, and I'll actually get that on pretty heavy so that it'll actually just soak and settle into the cracks and everything. The good thing about these main wall surfaces, it's a fairly heavy duty material, so you're not having to worry too much about warping and stuff. Now, if you start pouring a bottle of the stuff on it, of course that's a little different, and you're going to end up with some warpage and whatever, but just a good amount where you're actually getting some a decent amount of wetness on there. It will dry out and you will not have any problems with it afterwards. And if you are worried, the one thing I could suggest is put something heavy across the board until it dries to help level that out. I have not had to do that on anything, so I'm pretty confident that you should be okay. So the next part that I wanted to chat about is the other type, which was the red brick, which I did the I did the red spray, the red oxide primer spray, and we go over it with the wash. Now, I'm not doing anything too crazy with this. All I'm basically going to do with it is I take I like this particular one right now for the red brick, which is this kind of chalky finish, light gray. It looks very much like a typical grouting for bricks. And I'll just take a dab of that. Let me just grab here. And I don't typically worry about like a really nice brush. I'll use sort of my hacked up brushes, and I'll take the water that I have for cleaning my brushes. I'm not worried about it being perfectly clean and whatever. And I'll just dab nice little amount and into the tray. And then I'll just keep loading up with water till I kind of get it to a consistency. And if I've gone overboard, then what I'll do is I'll just go backwards a little bit. And all I'm going to do is these are the chimney pieces. I'm just going to go over this until I kind of get it in all the cracks and whatever. So that's getting still a little bit too much for me. So I'll just go back. And I'm not worried right this second that I'm overdoing it, because what I'll do is if I feel that this is getting a little too much, I'll just go back with the paper towel and I'll just soak some of that up. And then I will let that dry out. So just get it on there so that I get in the cracks, and you can see that that's starting to build. So yeah, that's a little bit much on there right now. All I'll do is I'll take a little bit of paper towel and I'll lightly go across and take some of that off the top. Now, those first ones actually kind of came out a little bit better. I'll hold this up 1 second here. Now, if this, see, these first ones I did, this is a little heavy, but I'm not too worried about this, because what I'll do is I'll let that set up for a second or two, and then I'll go back to it and I'll just kind of drag a little bit more off, because that'll dry out pretty quick. So now you can start seeing that. And that, here, so if it is a little heavy, all I'll do is I will actually do just a very, very light dry brush of a red or some of the reds on there, just to pop that brick out a little bit. But it may not be coming through on the camera as well, but this is actually looking really good on this particular one right here. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. So again, what I do with the bricks is before washes or after washes, it's not really a big deal to me. If you want to do it before, I'll sit there with the bricks and I'll take the colors, and I will go from like a terracotta, a heritage brick, a burnt sienna, and even a burnt orange. These are the four that I've been kind of doing. And I will take variations on those just throughout the wall in order to kind of give that broken up. If you do it before you put the wash on, then they all tone down. With some of them, you may want to go back over with that color because it gets lost in with the wash. That's why it's kind of a bit of before, bit after, and to what you kind of feel comfortable with. Once those are all set, like really dried out and set up, then I might go back and I might use other kind of washes in order to kind of give little staining and whatever. But one of the big things that I've kind of been pretty comfortable doing is with the pan pastels in order to kind of do last pieces on those. As for the stone itself, so that's the last one I want to show tonight.
You know, Bryan, if you could maybe show this next time, because we're just out of time. You only had 15 minutes.
Okay. All right then.
if you don't mind, I'm sorry to have to do this, but we've got so much, it's just a tight show tonight, so
Okay,
I
then.
do. And we'll ask some questions of Bryan a little bit later in the show. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Okay, then.
Now I'd like to turn to Chris Blackmarr for some of his sandbox modeling. Chris, welcome.
Hi there. And hang on one second here. I just hit the wrong button. I'm sorry.
And Chris, if you can try to stay right within the time, I would appreciate it. But we really are running late.
Yeah, I can rush it or here for you. And basically, what I'm going to do here is backtrack a little bit because the I think in the process of going along here, we managed to skip one of the cabins. And so again, the idea of the sandboxes that I'm trying to do is just a broad set of modeling skills to allow you to gain the confidence in everything else. So again, this one is the second sandbox is already posted on the New Tracks website, but this is the Colin's cabin. And this one had a goal of some base weathering, which was a little bit different from what you normally would attempt to achieve. I then also wanted to use a mortar line product to try to add texture to wood to simulate the concrete base and do an evaluation of that. And then if I could develop some methodology in creating and carving plaster or hydrocal so as to create a crumbling type of chimney effect, that I was kind of after that. And then I also wanted to do a little bit of a study of laser cut window products instead of using the old styrene castings. This one is a board by board over the mat template, and the roof is shingled, and we are scratch building the door. So the discussion and coloring here, I'm just going to say that there's a lot of oddball colors that you see on things in the Colorado area. And so I was going to try to achieve some of the coloring effects that you normally don't see. In this picture, you can kind of see how the wood siding is orange and yellow, and then it goes to a black. And a lot of that black sheen, although it doesn't show up in this, is actually kind of a glossy type sheen too, almost like a gasoline or an oil type thing has come down. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention in this photo is the knot holes. The knot holes are actually yellow with a black center. And so how do you create that? Because normally we always go after the black type of knot holes. Well, I'm going through, and so I wanted to really just kind of focus on the yellow, orange colorings. And these are the soft pastels that I used to create the coloring on the structure. This is kind of what it looked like. Again, in the instructions, I go through and I cover doing the end stains on the ends. And then you'll also notice along the base of the boards, there is some wicking to give some additional weathering to it. The yellow knot holes, I kind of just decided not to try to really focus in on this build, but just really focus more on that broad coloring. There's lots of different examples of this. I was up in the mountains. I go up a couple of times a year and take a look around. And this is just a brief overview of some of those. Notice the weathering on the structure here and how it goes from virtually a white all the way to the black. And it includes some of that orange. You can see that orange in the windows, on the siding, just all over the place. Also notice some of the crumbling brick in this structure and the foundation there a little bit. Stepping back a little bit here, I brought this one up because notice the piece of plywood kind of sticking up in front here. It's also got that orange. So it's not just the siding. Other pieces of wood pick up this orange texture coloring in the Colorado area. And so if you're doing that, that might be something you want to pay attention to. This one, I also wanted to bring attention to how some of the boards go from the very weathered gray all the way down to the orange and black. Also note the chimney on a shelf, which is not something you would normally see. Stepping back a little bit further, in a little bit different example here, I wanted to point out in this picture the black structure here kind of in the right front. Notice just under the eave, you've almost got a green coloring there, almost a moss. And then down below that, notice how the texturing and coloring is on the clapboard siding. And this reflects very much to the last time I presented the Sandbox series and the siding of using the ink markers to bring this type of thing in. That one I'm hoping to get into the New Track webmasters to get posted here this next week. It's not New Tracks, it's my not getting the information to them as I promised I would do. The other thing that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention here was the extension on the ladder over here by the window on the left side. And one of the slides later brings out the point of notice the tilted pole in the background. I'll just kind of bring that up right now because we're running short on time tonight. And finally, notice the pile of dirt here and the dirt colors. What I'm trying to do here is show you how to use your own photos when you are taking pictures of things. And you are working on your own in this. I was in, all of this is in the same town up there. And this is, I was in the Swedish area of the old town, and thus some of the structures have that flavor. But again, notice here, you've got that orange all over the place. You've got it on the shingles on underneath the eaves on the left, or excuse me, on the right. And then you've got that orange on the plywood. You've got it in the windows. You've got it on the doors, and it slides all the way back. The other thing here to notice is some of the piping and how some of it is only rusted around the bands. The first one on the right is just almost a straight L, and you've got rusting primarily just around the bands. The zigzag one in the middle, you have a little bit more rusting through it. And then the straight line down the back, that one, well, you can figure out if it's rusted or not. And then if you go all the way to the very back there, you can see some others that are rusted to the point of being black. Again, getting back to that orange color and the yellow knot holes, it's throughout the Colorado area. So it's not just on mines and things. You'll find it in the cities and all the way through. I then was going to go through a little bit more in detail about your own photography and using your pictures and how to use them and things. And when you're taking a shot, things to kind of think about. I think what I'll do here, since I haven't turned this in, I'll go on ahead and add this PowerPoint presentation to that, and you guys can If anybody's ever into it, they can kind of read it and study it. Here I referenced that leaning telephone pole. When I get done taking a picture, I'll go home and then I'll really sit down and evaluate them. And looking at that one picture that we saw back then, here are 19 other items that I picked up out of that picture as an example. I then go through the techniques of coloring the materials and putting together the actual cabin. I did use silver wood using a rolling technique with the hairs near the ferrule of the brush. We've covered that in the past. And then I created a platform base, just basically a square of strip wood, and I covered it with some polyscale paint, but I also used the Builders and Scale light mortar mix, and then a little bit of pastel pencils to add some additional texturing and coloring to that. I then have the evaluation that I always put in the Sandbox builds, and we'll just kind of go through this real quick. The 29 center here is that the wood is that yellow prototype. I think I about nailed it with the coloring sequence and the values of hues that I used earlier. The big thing is do not use strip wood framing with for your doors and window frames if you have put knot holes in it. That really failed. And this is just kind of a quick collage of pictures. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jim.
Chris, thank you so very much. I hate to rush you a little bit tonight, but I really do appreciate it. And as I said, everybody will have a chance to ask questions toward the end of the show. But right now, I want to turn to our featured modeler. Here is a man that many of us, when we think of the NMRA, think of Charlie Getz. He has made tremendous contributions to that organization for so many years. And the museum that he's going to be talking about tonight, I believe in the future is going to be looked at as one of the real legacy achievements for the NMRA Association. So Charlie, thank you so very much for being here tonight. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope everybody can hear okay. I didn't do it sound check level, but I hope it's okay.
It's fine.
Is it okay? And I feel like I brought a knife to a gunfight or a gun to a knife fight or something, because I don't have a slideshow for you because I wasn't aware I should do that. However, here's the good news. Better than a slideshow, I can give you, not tonight, a video tour of the exhibit led by myself with Ty Smith of the museum, who's the executive director. If you just go to nmra.org, the website of the National Model Railroad Association, you don't have to be a member to do this, and you will see a link. It's fairly prominent. And if not, go in the search bar and ask for just exhibit or NMRA exhibit. It'll come right up. And there will be a link to a live video presentation and a guided tour of the exhibit itself. So in the absence of having movies and slides and all those wonderful things, let me just very briefly describe a couple of things. Number one, what we're talking about, which is always helpful. Number two, the importance of it, not just for the NMRA, but for model railroading. And number three, what it's hopefully going to do for the hobby in the long run. The exhibit is exactly that. It's not our museum. It is an exhibit at the one of the best museums in the world, the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, California. Now, many of you, especially those up in our frozen north of Canada, and literally getting that way this time of year, may not make it down anytime soon. But again, we have a video tour. You can at least look at it there. However, the museum itself is one of the most frequently visited tourist attractions in California. You might find that hard to believe, but it is actually the 6th most visited attraction in California. That includes Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Marine World, all those places. But number 6 is Old Town Sacramento with the museum located in it. It is all a state park. The museum is owned by the state of California. Ironically, it is one of the more successful elements of state government in a state which many would say is very dysfunctional without getting into politics. But the museum actually makes money. When have you heard that about a museum? They charge admission, of course, a nominal admission, and they get 600,000 visitors, paid visitors a year, in addition to a number of freebies. So that's a pretty darn good exposure. Now, why are we there? Well, we're there for 2 reasons. Number 1, Bob Brown, a name may be familiar with you if you're a narrow gauger, you better know that name, editor and publisher until recently of the Gazette, still editor of the Gazette, narrow gauge shortline Gazette, one of the premier scratch building / building craftsman, craft person magazines, even if you're not a narrow gauger on the market, said years ago, if you want to get people into the hobby, you have to show them what we do. You can't describe it. People are going to think what? They're going to think about Christmas trees and Lionel. Maybe less so now, but it's still a reality that people equate what we do with what we call tin plate or toy trains. And there's nothing wrong with either of those nice items. That hobby of tin plate toy trains is a very important part of model railroading, but it is not what we do with scale model railroading. It is not what you do on this forum every week. So we wanted to show, and the museum gratefully and nicely wanted us to show what is scale model railroading all about. In addition, the museum had a model railroad exhibit and still does, but it wasn't scale model railroading, it was tin plate. There's something in the museum, it's at the mezzanine level, if you go or are familiar with the museum, which is basically upstairs, quote unquote. And there is a toy train exhibit, which a family put in years and years ago with a $1 million bequest of this gentleman's personal collection. Sefton Toy Train exhibit, it's called, after the Sefton family. It is beautifully done, absolutely stunningly done, but it's all about tin plate and toy trains. And there was something missing, and that was scale model railroading. Now, the museum itself, to their credit, recognizing that, created 4 beautiful little kiosks, little stands, and each one of those has a different scale, N, H, O, S, and O. And each one had exhibits which consisted of diorama and individual models in each scale with a little explanation as to what those scales were all about. That was all they could do with their budgets and their expertise. So 10 years ago, I approached the museum as well as a number nationwide as part of the museum committee saying, would you be interested in a scale model railroad exhibit? And most of the museums we approached, because we weren't just going to the CSRM, like the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum, the Colorado Railroad Museum, indicated initially yes, but, and there was always a but, some wanted us to build a wing of a museum to add such an exhibit, literally. Colorado was very enthusiastic, and they wanted us to buy land next to their existing museum so that we could erect a building and have a model railroad museum. A little overly ambitious for us, and we didn't have the money. So long story short, CSRM, of all those museums, and it's one of the top 3 or 4 in the world, in my opinion, not only was enthusiastic and offered us space, but they refused to charge us for the space. They said you can have free space. Now, when's the last time you heard that? So we grabbed at that opportunity, and there were no strings attached except we had to do the exhibit. 10 years later, it's open. Why 10 years? Well, about 7 of those years were not our fault. It was the state of California. 2 things, quickly. Number 1, we were unknown in the museum world. The NMRA is known in model railroading, but to the museum world, who the heck's the NMRA? So we had to establish our bona fides with this museum and explain to them we weren't a bunch of nutcases who were going to bring in a bunch of crappy looking things and stick them in their museum. We worked it out. Now, I was an attorney at the time. I'm a recovering attorney now, retired. So I'm trying to get my reputation back. And I was able to work with them and work out language and contracts and all those things, all the legal stuff you don't want to hear about, to get all that accomplished. $1 million later, which is how much it cost, not 1 penny from dues, not 1 penny from NMRA operating funds, all donations. We opened the exhibit, soft opening, this past spring, with COVID fairly quiet now. And we're going to have some kind of an opening ceremony at some point when masks don't have to be worn and all that nonsense. But it's open and it's operating and you can see it. So very quickly, let me tell you what's in the exhibit and then why it's so important for model railroading and for the NMRA. As Bob said, you have to show people what scale model railroading is all about. Now, we did that with the help of a group called Gizmo. Gizmo does exhibits for professional organizations, but they do them for some pretty high number organizations. Disney, for example. They helped build a number of exhibits for Disney overseas and Disney Anaheim and Disney World for traveling purposes or just exhibits for Disney itself. They've also done museums. So they were perfect for us. They knew nothing about model railroading, and I mean nothing. So they had to learn what our hobby was all about. And because of that, not only did they have the expertise about doing an exhibit, but they had the newness of an outsider. They didn't know about our hobby, as I mentioned. So they looked at it from eyes we could never do. We look at our hobby from the inside. And what excites us doesn't excite Freddie Smith from Akron, Ohio, who knows nothing about the hobby. So it's great to have a professional, when we have an exciting idea, tell us, yeah, maybe that isn't so interesting to Freddie Smith from Akron, Ohio. And so the exhibit is designed not for model railroaders as much as for the public, because the purpose of the exhibit is to educate them about the hobby, but also to, unlike any other exhibit in that museum or anyone I've ever seen on model railroading, to entice them to become a model railroader. And indeed, it gives a lesson on how to do that as part of the exhibit. So when you first come to the exhibit, the first thing you see is a wall-sized picture of John Allen's Glory and Defeated. In and of itself, a piece of work, not just the model railroad, but the picture itself. It is sharp, it is in color, it is spectacular, and it grabs you by the neck and shakes you because you don't expect that. I mean, if you've seen the Glory and Defeated, and all of you have seen pictures, it is something. Now, I've mentioned this before, but you'll think I'm nuts, but it's true. It's the first model railroad I ever visited in person. Now, can you imagine seeing the second model railroad after seeing that one? So that was my first model railroad I ever saw as a teenager. And John was a gracious host, but it left an impression, as it does with everybody. And I can tell you in person, it's much more impressive than it ever was in photos. And John was a professional photographer, so it's pretty nice. But that's the first thing you see. Then you see across the hall from that, or across the opening, you see a G-scale trestle with a G-scale train, and then a matching N-scale trestle with a matching train set within that G-scale trestle. It shows the yin and yang, if you will, of model railroading. Now, we thought about a Z-scale trestle, but the person who built the trestle refused. They said, no, I'm not doing that. And the person who built the trestle in G-scale, which is massive, that's the first structure they ever built. It's a woman, and she worked for Gizmo, and she's not a model railroader. But when you see that trestle, either on the tape or in person, it's pretty nice. After that, there is a large gallery of about 7 dioramas, which show the breadth and height and width of model railroading. The first one is built by Australians, but it's of New England, and it's absolutely stunning piece of work, highly detailed, of a mythical New England town with a 2-foot railroad, although it's OM30, O scale, by the way. And this is called Smuggler's Cove. It was built by gentlemen from Australia who never had been to New England, but they'd been to the US. One of them had. And it's stunning. That's followed by a S-scale SN3 diorama, Chama, New Mexico, which some of you may have seen. It was PBL's traveling display, Peterbilt locomotives, who's a purveyor of SN3 equipment, if you don't know. And for many years, it was out on the road. It is an accurate representation of Chama, New Mexico, on the Cumbers and Toltec now, formerly Rio Grande, as it was in 1955. So it shows that some of us who model accurately of a prototype. The next one is something that I had for many years. It's the San Juan Central, which was a model railroader project railroad in HON3, the only one they ever did in narrow gauge, which was built by Malcolm Furlow in 1983, roughly. It appeared in the magazine in 83 and 84, and is the subject of a book still in print on how to build that railroad. It is a seminal model railroad, very, very well known. Followed by a diorama showing an N-scale recreation of a Matthew Brady American Civil War photograph showing a train with a monitor, which is a mortar. It's a famous Matthew Brady photo, and an MMR named Mike Blumenstock had recreated that photo in 3D. Next to that are some O-scale buildings from Occidental, a Northern California town, which was served by a narrow gauge railroad. And then the very next one, and we're almost to the end of this gallery, the very next one is a piece of Irv Schultz's old-time HO layout showing a Michigan iron dock with a ship and a camelback pulling ore cars across the top of this massive ore tipple. And then there are two Jim Vale dioramas. One is a sawmill served by a narrow gauge West Side Lumber Company, West Side Sawmill in California. And the last is a Santa Cruz Lime Works, also served by a narrow gauge railroad that was recreating a formerly existing actual lime works down in the Santa Cruz, California area. Now, across the hallway from all of these 7 or so dioramas is a timeline on scale model railroading with over 450 artifacts. Now, this timeline starts in 1847 with the earliest reference to scale model railroading we can find. And it was actually in a Tennyson poem where he described going to a garden party in England and that he saw I think he called it a petite railroad puffing around the garden. So there was a miniature railroad, live steam, in 1847, 20 years after real railroads began, puffing around a garden in England, and Tennyson noted that. It includes such obscure and kind of, we hope, interesting information as the connection of the Titanic sinking to model railroading. And there is one. If you want to ask me later, I will tell you, but there is one. And then it goes all the way up through the Depression, through the World War II years, the 50s, the 60s, all the way up to today in the digital age. So it's kind of a educational and interesting showing of progression of scale model railroading from its earliest days and its crudest level to today's digital age. Now, the big gallery, and that's just part of this exhibit, but that's just the smallest part of the exhibit. The big gallery that you go into next is one that literally takes your breath away. There is a 40-foot long wall of trains, 18 shelves high, floor to ceiling, with every scale you can imagine, full length, accurate passenger and freight trains from all eras that have been assembled. Most of them are brass, not all, in all scales. There is everything you can imagine. There's even a string of reefers built from 1930 to 1940 kits by Howell Day, Red Ball, that are just stunningly nice, I mean, considering how old they are. Across from that massive wall of trains is a wall we call the wall of parts, and it is really a segmented story on how you go to become a model railroader. It's the thought process. It's how you research it. It's how you get information. It's what decisions you make as a brand new model railroader. So it's for the minority of people who go through this exhibit and look at it and say, you know, this is kind of neat. And I'd like to kind of find out more about this. And it gives you information and it shows products you can get today that can help you become a model railroader. In addition to that, there's a lot more there. There's a little history, or not a history, there's a little exhibit on the NMRA. There are some quotations from people, famous and otherwise, about why they're model railroaders. There is a little section of a library that shows you some books you can get about how to become a model railroader. There are also, for those of us who are in the hobby, there's some hidden gems, and a lot of them revolve around famous modelers no longer with us. For example, we have John Allen's gory and defeated gory control panels, the ones that you've always seen in photos. Those were salvaged after the fire. We have all of the known models that are exact of John's work that are left, and there's only a few of them, but they're on exhibit. That includes 2 locomotives that have been restored from their burned condition by my good friend Kenichi not Yamamoto, what am I saying? Got a mental block. But he is a good friend in Japan who made, and I did an article on this in MR in February of 2020. He actually restored 2 of these locomotives that John had used and were burned in the fire, using original source parts for what he had to replace and getting them back into perfect condition. They look just like what they were, and they are the originals. There's also a scratch-built John Allen cattle car, which is stunningly gorgeous, and one of his passenger cars that survived the fire, etc. There are locomotives from Witt Towers, a name I'm sure you know. There are other items, including a live steam 1873 model locomotive built by Eli Whitney, Cotton Gin, his grandson. There is Tony Custer, if you know that name, his CTC panel, operable and operating with lights blinking, showing how it worked from the Allegheny Midland with an Allegheny Midland train on top. There's the original time saver from John Allen that's hanging above that, and it's a little section on operations. And then finally, we have a layout under construction right in the middle of this big gallery that shows the different stages of constructing a layout using things that are easily obtainable. Cato Track, Bachman and Walther's Rolling Stock and HO, Woodland Scenics, and it shows the stages of how to build a model railroad to show people that it's approachable. It's something you can do. All right, so that's in a nutshell the highlights of what's in the exhibit. Now, the purpose, as I mentioned, is to educate people about what scale model railroading is, show them the best of what scale model railroading is, but also to encourage them to become a model railroader. We hope that of the 600,000 people that come through there, that maybe a couple of those each year will be interested enough to pursue it. We're not trying to make them NMRA members, even though it's an NMRA exhibit. We want them to become hobbyists first, and then at some point they'll discover the NMRA. And if they become a hobbyist, then we all win. And if they become NMRA members, good for them. That's fantastic. But ironically, the NMRA exhibit is not to recruit members for the NMRA. It's to get people in the hobby, which we desperately need, as you know, especially younger people. And I think we'll be successful in that sense. Now, let me tell you why. In 10 years that they've been in existence, World's Greatest Hobbies has reached, and that's, for those that don't know, that's the traveling road show that Walther's and Athearn and Cato and a number of other people have put together. The World's Greatest Hobby has displayed to over 1 million people in 10 years. They're very successful. They go to different venues and reach thousands of people at each venue, and they show what model railroading is. We can reach that 1 million figure in a year and a half in this one exhibit. So imagine this exhibit's going to be there a minimum of 10 years, maybe 15, 20 if it's with refreshing. So that's a lot of people. And already it's had an impact. It's one of the 2 or 3 most popular exhibits at CSRM. what makes that even more significant is that CSRM is now a Smithsonian affiliate museum. It's the only railroad museum that is a Smithsonian affiliate. And that means that not only does it have a high bar to reach, but it has a reputation now as a Smithsonian level museum, which is about as good as you can get. So our exhibit is in very, very good company and very good hands. And the final thing I'll say about the importance of it, and this is to the NMRA, it demonstrates two things for the NMRA. Number one, that we as an organization are still relevant and can still do something of great benefit to the hobby and to the public. And that's important. A lot of people say, oh, the NMRA, that's yesterday. Their standards were fine in their day, but we don't need them anymore. Well, baloney. You really do. That's just nonsense. And standards are still being set as technology advances. And the second important thing about this exhibit to the NMRA is that it opens the door for our future, that if we do want to do a museum, then we have now the bona fides. Remember what I said about the bona fides earlier? That we had to establish that we could do something this good? Well, the museum believes that we can now do something this good, to the point that they are now building a massive, massive new addition to this museum. 2 large buildings across the Union Pacific tracks in the old rail yards at Sacramento, the old general shops. And this will be the Museum of Railroad Technology, which will be an addition to the California State Railroad Museum. Well, there's a blacksmith shop, the smallest building in that complex, but it's pretty big. They're holding that shop for us. They want us to put a museum there. They've invited us to do that. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and I'm certainly not one that's going to be leading that, because I think I've done my bit. But it's exciting, and it's down the road 5-10 years. However, because of this exhibit, they recognize that we are the right ones to partner with them and have a museum of scale model railroading, which again exposes the hobby to the public. Now, some of you may think this is all wonderful, maybe a waste of time and a waste of money, because so what? Well, if we don't have a future for the hobby, it'll go the way of gasoline-powered race cars, an interesting little blip. And I don't think any of us want that, and I don't think any of us hope that happens. So that's why this exhibit is important. That's why I encourage you, if you're ever out in California, please visit. Let me know what you think about it. If you don't like it, tell me why. If you love it, that's fine too. And if you can't visit, check it out on the internet. Tell your friends about it if they're coming out to California. I've done that to a few people, and they thank me not because of the exhibit, but because they discovered Old Town, which is one of the most interesting places you can go to, especially if you like old buildings. And also they discovered the CSRM, which is, again, one of the 3 or 4 top railroad museums in the world, along with York, Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. You fill in the blanks, your favorite, the B&O maybe. Colorado is getting there, not quite, but it's getting there. And one last point, and that is, as part of kind of a side deal, which was a very good deal. If you're an NMRA member, we were able to merge our library, the NMRA library, on prototype stuff, with the California State Library, which is one of the largest rail libraries in the United States, the largest west of the Mississippi. So now every NMRA member is automatically, at no charge, a member of the CSRM library and has the access online and also through their staff by phone call or by email to research in that library and to the assets in that library. And they are spectacular, especially for Western railroads. So that's all I can tell you. And again, apologies for not having a wonderful slideshow for you. I actually haven't even prepared one because my role was to have this thing happen and to oversee its installation and construction. And that was a little bit of work. So I never really saw myself as a post exhibit promoter, but here I am. So I'll be happy to answer any questions at now or whatever time you want. And as we wait for the moderator to wake up.
Well, Jim, your microphone is off.
How's that? Now can you hear me?
Oh, there you are, Jim.
Yeah. Listen, I really do appreciate, Charlie, what you did tonight. I didn't expect you to have a slide presentation. I wanted you to come and talk to us about it and give us your view of the significance of it and what the NMRA has really accomplished with this. And you've more than done that.
Oh, good.
Let me ask you this. You're not leading the charge right now, you said, for the next phase of this. But who is? Let's say that some modelers would like to be of help and get the second phase going. Who would we contact if not you?
Well, you can contact me, but you can also contact Alan Pollock, whose name is in the magazine, the NMRA magazine, also, I believe, online. He's the head of the museum committee. And Bob Brown and I are still members and will stay members of that committee. And it's the committee that's heading this next phase. I'm just saying, at 73 years old, and I think we're all getting up there. My time with the NMRA is over. I've done my bit, both as president for 2 terms and on the board with Clark Kooning, among others, for many years. So I don't see myself as being a leader in the next phase, but I'm excited about the next phase, and it would naturally build upon what we've done with the exhibit, and the exhibit would become part of that museum. So we're about a third there already. We already have the exhibit. We would move from its location where it is, and it's designed for this, into that new location.
You mentioned that you asked people to comment to you back and forth.
Sure.
What's the part of it that you get the most people saying that's the best part of the whole thing?
Well, there's 2 things, and this is all involving kids, which is very exciting. The wall of trains has been identified as a major problem for parents because the kids are literally so mesmerized by the color and the scope of this brightly lit wall of all of these trains, none of them moving, of course, but I mean, they're there, that they're literally hypnotized. And they, when the parents try to drag them away 5-10 minutes later, they start having a tantrum. They don't want to leave. That's a problem. The other one that gets the most comment is the layout under construction, because there's a giant red button. You push the button, the train runs. And kids love that. You can imagine that button will have to be replaced every 30 days. But the kids are pushing that button, the train's running. We have a cast of docents, volunteers, who make sure that train is okay. And the kids love that as well. And so we get a lot of positive comments. And I have been in that exhibit and watched this, both cases where this happened, where the kids just don't want to leave. I mean, they want to see that, even though the train's just going in a circle, keep it simple, stupid. They don't want to leave, and their parents are frantic because it's a big museum and they want to go out and have lunch. And little Johnny, little Janie don't want to go. So that's an encouraging sign, that kids naturally love trains, and they still do, right? And so many of my good friends who have grandkids mentioned to me, Frank is really into trains. Could he come see your stuff? And I'll say, sure. What happens, of course, is that a giant percentage of those kids hit teenage years, and the trains go whoop, as they discover girls' cars and rock and roll. So, but a small percentage of them will come back to it. So we're playing the odds. We really are. Let's play the odds and the long-term game, and hopefully we'll get some people in the hobby.
I agree 100% with you. Let me open it up for everybody to ask you questions and to talk to you.
Sure.
So any questions for Charlie?
Just one point, never go to a restaurant with broken ribs with him. He makes you laugh.
That's right. You had broken ribs. I forgot about that. Yeah, don't go with Clark Kooning, because I'll tell you a story about that. We went to a board meeting, and we went to a restaurant for dinner or something. And Clark had his Nikon at that time, camera or whatever it was around his neck. And the restaurant had some wonderful little photos all over on the walls and everything, like I have behind me here, that kind of thing. And so Clark had his camera, and he went to the manager and said, "Do you mind if I take pictures?" And the manager said, no, go ahead. So he starts lifting the pictures off the wall to walk away with them. And the manager just about had a heart attack. And Clark said, well, you said I could take pictures. So that's Kooning. You don't go to dinner with Kooning because you'll be embarrassed every time.
Good one.
True.
Just feed him hot jambalaya.
Yeah, well, that's especially this time of year up in Moose Flat, wherever he lives in Canada.
Hey, little insight here. I was going to Arizona during the show. My brother called me. I am not going as of now.
What happened?
The guy he's with has got tested positive.
Oh, for COVID. Oh, geez.
So now he has to go get tested tomorrow. So
it's your vaccination, folks. Okay, next question.
Absolutely. Anybody have any other questions for Charlie?
Sure. What's the connection between model railroading and the Titanic?
Okay, I knew somebody would ask. Well, there is a funny one. It isn't funny at the time. There was a model railroad magazine that was published in England. It was the first, we think, published, and it was the only one published in the world at the time. The U.S. did not have its model railroad magazine until the early 1900s, and it wasn't at 1912. Well, there were the June 1912 issue of that magazine from England had a little blurb in it, and it said, "To our American subscribers, we apologize that you did not receive the May 1912 issue, which went down on the Titanic." So they had shipped their entire couple of hundred issues from England to New York, where they were to be mailed out to their American subscribers on the Titanic, because it was the fastest ship in its maiden voyage, and they had said they were going to break the speed record. And so the magazine never got delivered. It is somewhere on the floor of the ocean. So the May 1912 issue for 215, I think, American subscribers, which is a phenomenal amount in 1912, is on the bottom of the ocean in the Titanic. We find obscure facts.
Charlie, John Garrity, Australia.
Yeah, John, how you been?
Pretty good. Quick question.
Sure.
That magazine, would it have been Model Engineer or something?
I think it is Model Engineer. Yeah, actually, I'm trying to remember the name, but I think you're correct.
Okay. Well, for those not in the know, Model Engineer is probably the longest running model hobby magazine in the world. It was primarily focused on live steam, but there's a whole flock of other models in there. And over the years, they've done a lot of good stuff. And that's my comment. And apart from Smuggler's Cove, any plans to import anything else from Australia?
Well, you just about throttled us, because you nice people paid the shipping of that modular ON30 layout up to the U.S., which was not insignificant.
Yeah.
But we would love to have anything our good friends down in Australia want to provide, because the modeling down there, if you have never been to Australia, and I've been 4 or 5 times now, you've got to get down there. The modeling level is incredibly good. I've been to a number of their conventions, which are great fun, by the way, and they do them right. I tell you, the products you can't get here. I mean, I know who needs an HO kangaroo up in California, but that isn't what I'm talking about. Some of the things they have, some of the models I've seen, anything like the Red Stag Lumber, that was a company. I mean, anything done by those gentlemen is inspiring and is absolutely the best modeling. And Smuggler's Cove is some of the best modeling you'll ever see in any scale. It is spectacular. And visitors, again, that's probably the most I would say probably the most popular, and it's the first one they see. of the dioramas, and I call it a diorama because unfortunately we can't have it running. It's just not practical. But it's probably the most popular because it is so friggin' detailed. And every square inch has something interesting going on in O scale, and it is stunningly beautiful. So you guys done good.
Thanks, Charlie.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Is
Sure.
there anything on the east side of the Mississippi that the NMRA has?
Well, the NMRA does not on the east side, although we sure looked, and a number of people said, "Oh, why do you have it in Sacramento?" Because because Charlie and Bob are in San Francisco Bay Area. No, that is not why we have it in Sacramento. We have it in Sacramento simply because they're the only place of the many we approached that would do this, and we didn't have the money or the funds to have our own standalone exhibit. That requires a staff, that requires advertising, that requires a lot of stuff. Whereas putting it in a known and successful venue like a museum, automatically you don't have those problems. And sure enough, we don't here. But we did approach Pennsylvania. We approached B&O. We approached St. Louis, the Museum of Transport. There were a couple of children's museums we even went to. Most said no. Almost all of them said no. The few that said yes had strings that we couldn't reach. We just couldn't do. Now, in terms of another exhibit, there is a group in Chattanooga that is trying to start a museum of miniatures, and they want the NMRA to do something on railroading, but they haven't gone beyond the talk stage. So it's possible that could happen. The other problem we have, of course, is volunteers. An exhibit, especially one like this, now this is unusual because it is extremely a high standard exhibit. We had to be in a Smithsonian affiliate. An exhibit like this requires a lot of money. Like I said, this one literally cost $1 million, and that requires a lot of fundraising. And it also requires a dedicated volunteer staff to see the project through. Now, believe it or not, there were two of us who saw this whole thing through. That wasn't the plan, it's just the reality. Bob Brown and myself. We had a number of other wonderful people give us a hand on various segments. So I'm not saying it was just us. But if you do something in the East or you do something in the Midwest, you're going to have a crew of people, a wad load of money, and a determination. And if you have those three, go for it.
Well, being a long-term member of the NMRA, I can imagine, I don't have to imagine, I know the determination that it took for you and Bob to get this thing done and to get all the funds raised and to get the coordination with California and all the rest of it, because everybody in the NMRA was not for this. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth. So I can't tell you how honored we are for you to be here tonight, because without you, in my opinion, it never would have come about. It took somebody with real dogged determination, in my opinion, to weather the storms that happened for a long time in the NMRA, to get this money raised, to get everybody on the same page, and to push this project along. So congratulations. It was a hell of an effort.
Well, thank you. And I hope everybody will take a look at the exhibit through the NMRA website or YouTube. You can just literally type in NMRA Model Railroad exhibit in YouTube and you'll get videos on it as well. And these are professionally produced, by the way, so they're not some amateur, iPhone video. And take a look and be proud, because this is something that is something done for all of us. It is something I'm proud of, but it's something you can be proud of too. And good people like Clark Kooning, when they were on the board and when he was vice president, I mean, a lot of people contributed to this. It wasn't just me and Bob Brown, who's, by the way, doing well if you're a Gazette fan. And if you are a Gazette fan, I hope you've enjoyed the modeling that I've been able to do. I wish I could bring some here and show you, because I love modeling too. And I commend you for this this wonderful session that you're doing. It's really great. But thank you again, and I won't take any more of your time, but I appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much for being here this evening. I really do appreciate it, and I know everybody else does too. Charlie, let me ask you, if people are interested in volunteering for this next phase, which sounds fantastic to me, can you put your email maybe in the chat, or Clark, maybe you can put his email in the chat?
Clark can, sure. Clark can do that because
so
my
that-
technical, I know, I literally
You're
am.
okay with that, Joe Charlie? You're okay with that?
I'm literally 15 minutes from Apple's headquarters. I'm about 10 minutes from Google's headquarters. And do you think I know any of this stuff? Nah.
But you're okay with me putting it up for you?
Sure, I'm okay. I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
Okay. And by the way, the $20 is in the mail for you.
Yeah, but it's Canadian.
Well, yeah.
Charlie, thanks so much for being.
All right, I'm gonna say sayonara and go have my dinner because I'm on the Pacific and we haven't had dinner yet. So take care, everybody.
I understand. So now I'd like to open this up for questions for all of the build-alongs and for Chris and so forth. For any of you that have any questions about the modeling tonight. I know one person had a question for Dave Schultz that I cut off.
I did have a question about the ITA build, and it actually goes back to last week. And the masking process, when you did the spray painting, did you mask with Fiscuits or with tape or with a liquid? And how did you manage to go around that curved area? If you were using like tape or something, how did you mask that? And was there a specific sequence in the masking spray painting process?
Wow, that's a lot there. Okay, so masking, I just use painter's tape. I'm simple. I'm a very simple kind of guy when it comes to a lot of the stuff that I do. I don't want to say that I'm a master at anything. I just kind of do it as I have to. When it comes to the masking with the painter's tape, I largely do that when I'm doing kind of the spray type of stuff, just because spray is going to obviously go all over the place. And you may have to unpack that up for me one by one here, because I don't think I'm going to remember everything that you asked all in one there. When it comes to going around different things, just being careful. If it can't be masked or it's not easy to mask, then I will do different types of things to just be careful. One of the techniques that I typically have done is, if you're going to be painting and you got to do fine type of things, sorry, I'm not sure where, I can't see my camera, so I'm not sure if where everybody can see me here. Oh, well, it's off. That would explain why nobody's seeing anything here. I can't start video. Oh. Okay, for some reason I cannot start my video. Okay, so let's go back to this one and see if that works. Okay, so pretend that your fingers here are resting on something that you can stabilize, and that way you can do the brush techniques with some steadiness if you have to go into finer places. When it comes to something such as, I think what you're referring to is going around these. Yeah, I did mask, but it's taking a lot of little pieces of tape and ripping them and kind of fitting them. So I try to avoid doing masking. So spraying's not usually something I do, but with the case of doing this dark brick, I did go through the exercise of actually masking those. Now, you can kind of put the tape on there and kind of cut it out or whatever. I just kind of ripped and tore and fitted it in until I kind of covered what I needed to, and then took big pieces over the larger areas. So that's kind of what I do for those type of things. The process for me is, at least with this, was I get the base sprays down is what I did. Then for the stuff like the brick, I went with the Hunter line with the kind of darker washes in order to fill into those gaps and cracks and whatever, because that's what you want, is you want that everything to kind of build up, so to speak. And it's the same as doing I guess anybody who's done like scenery painting and whatever, you kind of go from the back to the front. Still, it's kind of the same effect or same kind of policy. So I think I can still share my screen here. So I just took a few pictures. So hopefully this will, so this was the one that I had where I had the one side with just the base on the
You're
brick.
still not sharing.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to hit the actual. There we go. There, you can see that now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this was the this is the one where I had I guess it would be the right side there, where it didn't have the paint on the brick. So I went with that kind of darker brown to get into the cracks and everything. I find it gives that kind of grimy look without having to, because if you did like a very light gray, like an actual grout wash in there, you really wouldn't see it with the yellow paint. So in this case, you're actually kind of doing yourself a little bit of, the word's not coming to me, but you're going overboard with the darkness in order to get the brick to pop. Then with the dry brushing of the yellow, I went and I started doing that tonight. I kind of finished it off while we were listening to the others, and then I started hitting it with some of those other colors. And then what I went back was I went with the sepia brown wash over top of that, and it tones down that yellow, even though I'm using a pale yellow, so that it's kind of got that grittiness and everything to it, and just accentuates. So you're really up close here, so you can probably see it's not like perfect on some of these paints, but I don't really want perfect in a lot of cases, because at an HO scale, when you're about a foot and a half, 2 feet, 3 feet away, this is all going to blend quite nicely. And then with some final weathering and so forth, this will all kind of come together. So these are the ones where I did the stone bases a little bit. So you can see I kind of built it up with different colors, but the one I wanted to. So those were the chimney ones where I did the wash, and I went back and hit it with some of those other colors. And if I needed to, I can kind of tone that down a little bit more where some of those colors pop a little bit. But I find that having that pop of color will actually, from a couple foot distance, will actually help that stand out nicely. And I can still go back and add more on the wash. This was just kind of doing kind of a quick go around at the wash. The one on the left hand of the screen, I think kind of shows the bit nicer. And if I need to, I can dry brush a little bit of red tones or whatever to make that brick pop back out if I need to. So it's just different types of ways that you can go through this. With the dark brick like this, I don't necessarily need to go with like that sepia brown on it but I'll do a couple different things in order to kind of make it look dirty in certain places. Pictures that, like, I'm going to say that Nick is a really good modeler himself, but one of the things that he and one of his partners does that's really cool is they use a lot of color, and they're a little bit more they're a little bit heavier than I am with some of the stuff, but the effects that they achieve are really quite neat. with some of these. So as you can see, like in this particular one, there's a lot of dirt in the brick, so to speak. So it just depends on kind of the level. And this is why, if I'll go back and say it again, the buildings where you actually sit there and have pictures of those kind of things can be really helpful to you. So I think hopefully I've answered all the questions that were kind of there.
I think you answered my question real adequately, and I want to thank you on that. And I also wanted to throw in a brief comment on, I thought your dry brushing tutorial explanations was excellent tonight, so thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Anybody else have any more questions?
Yeah, this is Rich Randall. I have a question on the waffle side car. Is David?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, this concerns the end of the car. We fasten the ends to the floor. So I'm wondering, see my end here.
Yep.
Did you mill out the back of this?
Oh, okay. You've got the older version. He didn't mill out the slot that I have in mind. So what you basically have to do is line up right where that hanger is, line that up with the bottom of the floor. Let me see if I can show you on this one here. Can you kind of see how I lined that up?
We've lost your camera.
Okay,
Yeah, can you see how I lined it up that where this hanger is right here?
yeah,
You line it up with the bottom of that where the draft gear will go. So that has to be even. So that's that. Like I say, I didn't realize that that first kit I built didn't have that slot in there like this one does. So just line this piece up here with the with where the draft gear will slide, make that even all the way across, and that's where you line up your ends.
well, you realize that the slot, the ends are going to be too far apart because the slot has a relief in it.
Well, the newer kit does. My guess is put your ends up there. You can just kind of clamp them if you can, or put them in between something, and then lay your side in there and see if it looks like it's going to fit.
Yeah,
like I say, that first car I built, the one that I've got painted orange, that didn't have those milled out areas, and the sides fit in there perfectly. So I don't know if John redesigned the kit to shorten the sides up a little bit to allow for that relief. But just double check it. Check it out. See if
I did
see if the sides are too short or too long. But I'm guessing, because I didn't have a problem with my car and it didn't have that first relief. So I'm guessing your sides are going to fit perfectly between those ends when you put them on there. But just test fit it, set her on there, and hold, put some weights up against to hold the ends in place, and then see if your side fits.
Yeah, I did that. The side is a little bit shorter, which is allowing for that notch.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'm going to have to send these back to John.
Yeah, get a hold of him. He's probably got the new ends that have that notch in there. Send him those old ones, and he'll probably send you the new ones. I don't think it'll be a problem at all.
Okay. The other question is, these ends, they have a lot of grooves in them, like striations.
Yeah, that amazingly enough, that disappears with the primer. It looks like it's going to be rough, but you spray primer on there, and a lot of that disappears.
Okay.
So it's not been an issue, but the sides, some of the sides have that too. You can see a lot of where the print, each line of the print, but amazingly enough, when you shoot primer on there, that'll fill that in, and it's been not an issue.
Okay, Dave. That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, feel free to ask.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions?
Phil had a comment.
I was just saying you can use filler primer also, which helps fill those in. It's another way. And it's also a way of putting wood grain in, because you can use 3 or 4 coats of filler primer and then use a side of a razor saw to put wood grain into 3D printed stuff. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that for the side of a car like this, but you might try some filler primer.
Is that what they call it? I mean, when you go to
It's
the
just,
paint,
yeah, if you just go, if you go, it's a bottle of the regular spray paint at Home Depot, but it's called automotive filler primer.
okay.
And it's got more thick material in it, so it's a little thicker layer of paint, and it kind of fills in. It will fill in some holes. So if you can see them, it might be interesting to try some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, I had a question for Craig Cassidy and all that, but it's been so long, I forgot what it was. I should have wrote it down.
Well, it'll come back to you in a few minutes, Ed.
Yeah, I'll probably remember it once they hit the end meeting and all that. Then I'll be like, oh, that's what it is.
That's okay. You got my email.
Yes.
Well, unless anybody has any more questions, that's it for the show tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope most importantly, you learned something. We've got a full show again next week. They will get more in control as we go into December, particularly the later part of December. But right now they're very full, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate everybody and make sure that everybody has their questions asked and answered. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Kooning, for the after show.
Woohoo! It's the after show, which could be scary or it could be good. Somebody else is going to get that. So how's everybody tonight? And I don't know if he's still on. Let me see who's all on tonight that I can painstakingly bother. Let's see. Oh, Earl's gone again. Dave,
Charlie was smart enough to bail.
yeah, Dave. Oh, there. Now during the show a few minutes ago, I said to a friend from Cantonsville, Maryland, I said, "Hey, what are you eating?" And he kind of smiled. Hey, Rick, unmute yourself. You never did tell me you never did tell me what you actually had.
The boss made me stir fry.
Oh, you could have shared.
I could. Well, the cat had that opinion too.
All right. Well, I don't think. No, you've been on before, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Rick's, you're also following along on the ITLA build, aren't you?
Yeah, mine hasn't arrived yet. I got a hunch it's probably in a packing crate, maybe with the Rapido stuff that they recovered. I don't know, but
it's off the Los Angeles port somewhere, probably.
Yeah, I figured it took the long way from Canada to get over here to the East Coast.
Well, I started working on mine last week. I told Nick I'm trying something novel, and if it works out, I'll show it to him. If it doesn't work out, I'm going to burn the evidence.
Check your neighbor's mailbox.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know that one myself.
Oh, constant.
So, all right. So you're waiting on yours. Little did I know, I told Nick, I said, apparently, I'm helping his retirement fund because I have 3 of those same kits. I have no idea why. So anyway,
you have
Mr.
3?
Cosgrove, what's happening in? Are you in Florida or are you in Michigan?
I'm in Florida.
Oh well.
Yeah, we did get our first snow up there the other day.
Yeah,
but it was too warm, so it all melted as it hit the ground. So I guess I got about an inch.
We haven't had any up here in the Great Green North.
Amazing.
Yeah,
so
it couldn't
far.
cross the border yet.
Yeah, didn't have its COVID shot. But yeah, no, but they're talking in the next few days it might snow. So that's good for model railroading, though.
Oh, yeah. Good time work on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can interject here, just a quick second.
Go ahead,
Rick
Chris. Yeah.
had a question on the surface priming, the scratching of that thing.
Right.
And Phil suggested a surface primer. There's a couple of other products out there that he may want to utilize. One of them being Mr. Surfacer, and I can't.
Oh, is that part of Mr. Hobby stuff?
Let me get rid of that here. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, that's part of the Mr. Hobby line.
Yeah. Here we go. And it comes in a couple of different thicknesses. Like this one's the 1000, but it's basically various filler putties that's just been thinned out quite a bit.
Is it, Chris, is it self-leveling at
yes.
all? Oh,
yes.
great.
They add some other things to it and make it pretty good. And I still haven't tried this one yet. This is
back.
The Vallejo's product.
Oh, I've been using that all the time in my airbrush.
Yeah, and I don't know how this would fill. You know, the 3D.
It's a pretty
printing
thin coat. When I've used it, I've never really noticed any loss of detail or anything.
Yeah. So, but I have not used either one of these on 3D parts, so I don't know. But when Phil brought up the idea of the filler primer, this Mr. Hobby stuff, I thought would be really, really useful. And it does come in 3 different thicknesses, if you will. So just some food for thought. Sorry to interject there. I wanted to try to catch him before he jumped off it. I don't know.
Yeah, no. That's good. That's good.
There are products that are sold to level out 3D printed stuff too. I know markets some of them. I don't have any idea what they're called or anything. I've just bumped into them rummaging through their catalog.
Is it a paint, James?
It's some kind of a liquid. I don't know if you'd call it a paint or, I don't know what they term it, but it's literally sold to level out 3D printed products.
But I guess if you're using something like that, you have to make sure that the surface you're having it sitting on is level, because if you put that on it, you don't want it to form heavier on one side than the other or something, right?
I would guess. I don't know. Let me take a quick check here.
Yeah, I've tried a few things, but if you're trying to cover the layer lines, you have to be careful. You're not going to dull your detail, your like rivets and such, because essentially it's a liquid with it has surface tension on it, and it can. This is like a heavy coat of paint. I've talked to people that use Rust-Oleum primer filler, and you may have to do a little bit of cleanup after that. It leaves it real coarse chalk. There's also a device that's sold, or guys do it themselves with a 5-gallon bucket with acetone. Leave a printed item in acetone with the lid on it for whatever 24 hours or so. I've never done it. It works well with ABS plastics, but I don't use ABS.
Here, if I can share for a minute.
Yeah, everybody can share.
Yeah, there's Micromark stuff. I guess they call it a resin. It's a 2-part stuff.
Hmm.
It's not cheap, $40.
Yeah, but Christ, you wouldn't need more than a
Yeah,
quarter
whatever.
ounce.
It says it'll cover 100 square inches. So, whatever. Anyway, that's,
Yeah, just don't mix it all at once.
yeah, right. I've never used this stuff. I'm not a big fan of Micromark. I'm not, again, I've seen this on here. It exists. It's designed to do this. That's all I'm saying. That's,
Yeah, cool.
so.
Yeah, but.
Well,
it
I could
has
see
it
that
when it-
working,
when it'll give
especially
you detail.
if you remember back in filament printing's early days, you'd get automobile cars printed and they'd just be all fuzzy because it just had a very coarse surface. I could see this kind of stuff, especially filling in those little
Honestly, you were just looking at the dice.
Poor resolution is the, anyway, that's, so again, and you might be able to buy the same stuff at your local hardware store for less, or you might be able to buy something similar. Somebody else might be selling something similar. I don't know. Anyway, I've seen it in Micromark's catalog. I thought I would mention it.
Yeah, cool.
Clark got some, ask him.
What's that?
You got some primer?
Yeah, I got primer. And my wife doesn't like when I use it either because all my details become dull.
Oh, okay.
She likes me bright and bushy tailed.
Oh.
So, all right. Well, that's an interesting topic. Anybody else have any questions? I don't know. Brian, are you still here? Brian Schultz?
Yep,
No,
I'm still here.
Oh, are you? Anybody else have any questions for Brian? He's modeling away.
Yeah, Brian. This is my first time. I'm doing the ITLA kit too. This is my first time working with the MDF, and I haven't used any stain on it yet. How does it take stain compared to basswood or other sidings and stuff?
Well, I've typically always done the spray base, light coats, and that tends to kind of seal it up enough that it doesn't necessarily absorb very watery type of things and start warping. But Nick uses a material that's thick enough that it's pretty hardy.
Yeah.
To kind of liquid. But I wouldn't
meant
say
more
that
in
you want to
terms
drop this.
of absorption in terms of how it looks. Now I know all of his stuff is stone and brick, and I can't imagine using a stain directly on it, but there might be a case where I might just test with that, but I wonder if you have.
I have not used stains in that sense, because the only building that I did that was wood was Grimsby Station, but I painted it.
Okay.
I wasn't going for the stain look, but I know I've seen versions of that model that were done and they did do a stain and it looked pretty good. But I don't know how they did it or what they did per se, but it was going for that stain look. And I'm going to say that I found that with stains, my experience with the Hunterline stuff has been pretty good with most of those, but MDF is a little different. So yeah, I think you'd want to play with that a little bit to see, the MDF where there's nothing, the surface hasn't been marred.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to take very well, but the stuff where there's been some level of cut lasering to it, that will kind of take that stain a little differently. But that one's a bit of a tough call because I haven't had
so
enough
the sheet that
experience.
he has, the MDF, it's a pressed wood product. So
yep,
the outer surfaces of that are pretty much pressed under high pressure, and so they're not going to absorb the way it would if it was just sawn or something.
Well, I think on the surface you just have glue, right? You got a thin layer of glue on the surface, so you can't get absorbed through it. When you cut away to the wood fibers.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was saying, where you've got those the grout lines of the brick, the spalled brick cuts that he's done, like he's come up with a way to kind of do not like a complete cut, but like varying depths of cutting
Yeah,
in
he's just
certain
etching
areas.
into it.
And once you get those, yeah, the absorption is far higher than just the flat surface because of very much what was just said. So yeah, I've not tried to do those because any building where I've done kind of that, it's been strip wood or whatever. So I'm not trying to do a stain with that kind of a material. At least I haven't tried to yet.
Okay, thanks.
I too am doing the ITLA kit, and quite frankly, I have not even cracked the plastic bag yet. But and this may be kind of a stupid question because I haven't cracked the bag, but I've been kind of thinking about doing a little bit of kit bashing with this thing. So how does that MDF cut with the, say, a Zona saw?
It should cut fine, but you know, obviously be careful and don't rush. Because I've cut MDF pieces and it just depends on what I'm trying to cut, how big a piece I'm trying to cut and whatever, and how much control I can keep on it so that piece doesn't slide around on me, so to speak. So it will cut fine. It's just you have to take the appropriate measures to hold it properly in place and don't rush it, or else you will it will bugger up just like anything else will. But ideal, yeah, these, I can't see why you wouldn't be able to kit bash some of these.
Okay, I guess my question was if you use something like a Zona saw and make the cuts, they don't come out kind of jagged and stuff where you're cutting through those layers.
No, but like I said, I think you have to be careful and have it tacked down enough that it's not going to slide around and whatever, so that you can just go through. Like if you rush it, I think, yeah, you're going to end up with a mess. But I've not used the Zona saw, so you know, like how much control can you maintain with it? But if you've got the piece so it's not sliding around on you, I don't see why it couldn't.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, this is Jeff Jordan. The Wit and Wisdom kit is all made out of MDF as well, and I modified it in several respects, cutting it with an X-Acto saw. I have a tiny little miter box. It keeps the lines very straight. You take your time, you saw slowly, and you get a very sharp and very smooth cut. It's reminiscent of masonite. It's like miniature masonite. And so if you cut it slow, it gives you a very sharp, clean cut.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that kind of tells me to use the extra fine blade and
yes,
yeah. So that's the info that I was kind of looking for. Do I use the wider blade or the extra fine and stuff? So thank you. Excellent.
Any of you guys own the little miniature table saws?
I wish.
I have a Jeremac.
Oh well, I would use that.
Yeah, I've got a Jeremac connected to a foot pedal, so I can control the speed, because they're basically sewing machine engines attached, but they go up to 80,000 RPM.
Yeah. I bought the Micromark one, and it's got a speed adjustable one, and I've been using it like crazy in the last month that I've had it, and I've been pretty happy with it.
Yeah, for what I've been kind of considering, I'm just not sure that I'd be able to make the cuts on the table saw that I want to control it. So I don't know. I haven't played with this stuff, so I don't know. And I'm not even sure what I'm doing yet with it. That's why it's not even open.
Nothing wrong with that. I got 3 kits that are not open.
Only 3?
Yes. No, of the same building, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, but you can make them into one big building.
Well, I'm actually thinking of building the cube and then using another building to make the flats.
You can make it like it extends off from the cube type
Exactly,
thing.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I've I've talked with Nick a lot, obviously, and he's helped me with certain kits that I've wanted and I've designed and everything. So I got a lot better understanding of what goes into these. But it's really comes down to that these materials that he uses for his kits, I can understand why he's chosen them, just because there is a very much a consistency of quality and repeatable end result type thing. And
right.
Like the MDF may not be what you're looking for doing staining. I get that. But there is a quality to that is very consistent. So it makes, and it's very stable. So you don't need a lot of substructure on some of these things in order for them to work on their own.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I still haven't even built my station kit yet either, but you built yours, so.
Well, I can pull it out if needed, but
yeah, that's a neat kit.
Hold on.
If you're looking for a neat station, this the ITLL it's based on a CN prototype, but man, it's a beautiful kit.
Don't know if I can get this all in one shot with the camera, but we'll see what happens here. So this is the building that is in Grimsby, Ontario, for those who are not familiar with the area. You know what? I'm gonna have to put this camera up higher in order to get this.
Not that high.
Well, it'll be easier for me to.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay, so now I can kind of. Well, I may have to raise this a little too, but that's the.
You did a really nice job on it. I mean, I've seen this station in person, so.
So that's the building, and one of the neatest parts that I found was his whole substructure for these turrets and how it went together, and it was actually really. There's a challenge to it, of course, but it was actually simple if you followed the instructions, so to speak, to actually get it to come together quite nicely. So that's that side of the building. And then let me just grab this. So that's the street side. Okay.
Beautiful.
So I did it as if this was a brand new building. So the copper roof hasn't even patinaed, that kind of idea. So this one here, I was going to the level of trying to have everything look good, not, worn out and everything. So that's what I found. And, Nick was actually like, you did a copper roof, and he goes, we never even thought of that type thing, just because if you flipped over these panels, it was a shingle print on them. And I just flipped it the other way and then started working with the idea, because I wanted it to have a certain look and effect.
And what did you use for the copper effect, Bryan?
It's just the same type of paints,
Yep.
Michael's paints, but it took me 2 or 3 versions, because there's different, obviously, manufacturers, before I kind of got a copper look that actually made sense for the look of a copper roof.
Cool.
Because like a copper penny, even when it's new, like it's got a real brightness to it. But copper roofs don't quite have that same look. It's a little richer color, I'm gonna say.
Do you guys remember what pennies look like?
I still have some.
Okay, cool. Just checking.
They're dirty and old, but I got some.
Hey, could you do me a favor and put I missed when you had the two walls, like the corner, could you put those back up? I want to see how he treats like how the brick's made.
Oh, I haven't taken these out, but
I thought you just had two pieces of one there. Like the other building.
Okay, yeah, I believe I know what you're saying now. Well, actually you want the brick, so let me grab that. Sorry, I kind of made a mess of everything here. Okay, there we go. So this is
okay. So yeah, when you put that tab and slot together,
that tab and slot goes together.
Yeah. Now, does he have bricks cut like in the tab and like on the end of the tab or
no?
slot?
But he's actually working on that.
Okay.
He thinks he's figured that out, and I don't know if he's gone back to some of the older kits or whatever to update that, but it was a comment that I had and we got into a conversation, and he thinks he has it figured out.
No, but the kit has a strip that hides those tabs.
With this kit, there's the corner strips that will hide it. So no, there's nothing. But one of the areas where I had commented and he had kind of like, yeah, that would be awesome, is like you've got these see if it shows up, but you've got the indent of the window in the brick type thing. Well, all that little return there, you could capture that. Now, especially when you get into larger scales, it's really going to start to stand out type thing. And that's what he's kind of working out on, kind of.
Yeah, I was wondering, you just have to paint that dark in there so that you don't notice there aren't any actual brick.
I figured out a way to do the brick on the ends of the, like what would be on the ends of the MDF, but it requires, I tend to do one-off stuff and you need to do a bunch of them. So,
the problem with the tab and slot is, when I've designed the kits I've had printed type thing, I can make sure that those bricks are 100% in alignment vertically, so that could be done type thing.
Yeah.
But I've seen a number of kits that I've tried to put together, and the bricks on one wall are slightly shifted from the bricks on another wall.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't have that piece to kind of hide those, it would just look weird. It wouldn't. And for me, being of an architectural background, that stands out and just pisses me off right there.
Yeah.
But it is still the fact that you're trying to hide that tabbing.
Yeah.
Because if you're filling in the gaps or any of the little cracks, you tend to fill in the bricks too.
Right.
So it's a really, really tough thing to kind of deal with on a totally exposed corner. And the one I did, I actually introduced like a stone kind of corner molding, just because it's like, I can't get what I want. So I don't want it to look like crap. So I've come up with an alternative.
I laid a bunch of, I did it on a chimney, I think it was. And I made like 8 chimney sides and I put them together. And then I put those in the laser and cut them like they were a piece of wood.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it might work okay on the MDF because it's fairly thick, but like to try to do it on a piece of 32nd inch wood or whatever, you're trying to hit, you're just trying to hit this little bit with the laser.
I don't think I would.
I stacked up a bunch of them together and then I could cut them that way, so like I'd already laser cut on the side and then I turned them on end, but I needed a bunch of them together to do it. So like I said, it worked with a chimney because I was making 3 or 4 chimneys. I could put, 10 or 15 sides together, but to do like a one building, I just doesn't,
everything when it comes to laser printing it's either a cut or it's basically an etch.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of where you're cutting in order to how to get that horizontal line. To get the vertical lines, no, I don't think there's any way you're ever going to pull that off. But the horizontal lines, so that you can kind of get that wrap, yeah, you could probably deal with that.
Yes, I didn't really need any vertical lines because mine were only like a 32nd of an inch for HO. So you weren't a whole brick wide.
But when you deal with brick, you're going to have the interlocking of the corner.
Right.
So
yeah.
you got a full and a half, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
I
with
did something.
Those, that's where I would be kind of my thinking, just it kind of messes me up still.
Yeah, I made an S-scale gas station in brick, and I didn't try to do tab and slot. I just sanded a 45-degree angle into the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave one to somebody, and he's like, oh, you did a great job of butting those together so the bricks came out just right. And I said it was probably just random luck, but okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I probably need to ask Nick this. I've never really done anything with MDF. Do you have any idea like what kind of settings he uses to cut MDF?
Oh no, I like
okay.
the actual lasering.
It would be a trade secret.
Yeah, I think there's.
Yeah, possibly, but and I mean, I can experiment with mine if he doesn't want to tell me. But I just thought he could save me some trouble.
No, I don't know. He's a pretty good guy. So, but
yeah, he's a pretty good guy. You can
said,
reach out and ask the questions, but
I'm not going to go into production. I'm not trying to put him out of business by any means because I'm just looking for personal. Like I said, I bought a sheet of the MDF and I just thought if you had any advice on cutting it. It'd save me playing with it.
Well, I know I've watched the process of it actually being cut at his place and everything, and I know some of the background of how going about things, but there's more to it than I've tackled with him, and I like what that etching levels and depths and widths and all those, like he knows that stuff obviously, but with the MDF. It's a sturdy enough material that he can get a good groove in there type thing for brick. With some of the ones I've seen, it's so shallow, those grooves, that to do anything with it, you almost lose that detail right away. So it's a very tough thing. But like when I was painting these, like with that dry brush kind of technique, there's enough depth there that as long as you're not heavy on the paint, you can get great results.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to cut off the after show live for those
unveiling anyway. So good night.
Okay, good night, Jamie. We're going to continue on the after show, but it won't be recorded or taped or shown on YouTube. If you're on YouTube and you want to watch or join in, you should subscribe to New Tracks Modeling, and you can continue with us on the after show, I guess it is. So anyway, I'm going to stop the live stream, and to all of those who are on the live stream,